8 Messerschmitt Bf-109s circle the lone American aircraft like sharks. They are patient. Their prey is wounded, trailing a thin, dark line of smoke from its right engine against the brilliant blue of the Mediterranean sky. This is not a dogfight. It is a procedural execution, 21,000 feet above the Tyrrhenian Sea. The 5th of September, 1943, 14:18 hours local time. The air is clear and cold. Inside the cockpit of a Lockheed P-38 Lightning, specifically an F-5A photo-reconnaissance variant, First Lieutenant William Bill Crawford is flying on borrowed time. His right Allison V-30-1710 engine is failing, the oil pressure gauge needle dropping steadily. His indicated airspeed is a sluggish 220 miles per hour. He is over 200 miles from the nearest friendly base in North Africa. He is unarmed. The 8 German fighters are now moving in, their formations tightening for the kill. The lead pilot, an experienced ace, gives the command to attack. But Crawford does something that is not in any manual. He does not dive. He does not attempt a desperate weaving defense. Instead, he gently banks his crippled twin-boom fighter towards the lead Messerschmitt, a slow, graceful, almost welcoming turn. He levels his wings. He holds his course. He is now flying in loose formation with his executioners. The German pilots, fingers tense on their triggers, hesitate. The attack script has just been torn to pieces. These stories of quiet, procedural courage in the face of impossible odds are a crucial part of our shared history. To help us continue to bring them to light, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I also want to know where you are watching from today. Whether you're a pilot, an engineer, or someone who believes these stories must be preserved, your voice is a vital part of this community. Leave a comment below. I read every single one of them. In the late summer of 1943, the war in the Mediterranean is at a tipping point. The Allied invasion of Sicily in July, Operation Husky, has been a success. Mussolini has been deposed. Italy is teetering on the edge of surrender. But the German war machine has reacted with brutal efficiency, pouring elite divisions into the Italian peninsula to disarm their former allies and establish a series of formidable defensive lines. The Allies are now faced with the daunting prospect of a long, bloody slog up the boot of Italy. Air power is the key. To support the coming invasion of the Italian mainland, Allied air forces must systematically dismantle the German ability to resist. This means destroying railways, bridges, supply depots, and, most critically, airfields. The German Luftwaffe and the remaining loyalist elements of the Italian Regia Aeronautica are a potent threat. They operate from a network of well-defended airbases, flying capable fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Mach-E C-2005 Veltro. To bomb these targets effectively, you must first find them. You must know their defenses, the number of aircraft they hold, the state of their runways. This is the domain of photographic reconnaissance. It is a lonely, high-stakes intelligence war fought by pilots flying unarmed aircraft deep into the heart of enemy territory. Their mission is not to fight, but to see. The quintessential aircraft for this job in the Mediterranean theater is a specialized variant of the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The standard P-38 is a revolutionary fighter, a large, twin-engine, twin-boom aircraft with its armament concentrated in the nose, giving it ferocious, pinpoint firepower. The photo-reconnaissance version, designated the F-4 or F-5, sacrifices this armament for a suite of high-resolution cameras. Where the cannons and machine guns would be, a carefully engineered camera bay is installed in the nose, carrying a combination of forward oblique and vertical cameras that can capture a wide swath of territory in stereoscopic detail. The F-5 Lightning is a perfect reconnaissance platform for the theater. Its 2 Allison engines provide the safety of redundancy for long flights over water. It is fast, capable of speeds over 400 miles per hour. And most importantly, it can operate at extremely high altitudes, often above 30,000 feet, placing it above the effective ceiling of most enemy fighters and flak. A reconnaissance pilot's only defenses are speed, altitude, and surprise. The missions are long, solitary affairs, demanding an extraordinary level of navigational skill and discipline. An F-5 pilot might spend 6 or 7 hours in the cramped cockpit, much of it on oxygen, flying a precise, pre-planned route to a target hundreds of miles away, completely alone. First Lieutenant William Crawford was not a fighter ace. He was a different kind of aviator, perfectly suited to the unique demands of the 3rd Photographic Reconnaissance Group. Before the war, he had been a land surveyor in his native Pennsylvania, a job that required a meticulous mathematical mind and an affinity for maps and geography. When he enlisted in the Army Air Forces, his test scores pushed him towards navigation, but his desire to fly was absolute. In flight school, he excelled not at acrobatics or mock dogfighting, but at the precise procedural aspects of aviation. He was a master of dead reckoning, of instrument flight, of fuel management. He understood the P-38, not as a weapon, but as a complex system, a stable camera platform that he could place with pinpoint accuracy anywhere on the map. His squadron mates respected him for his quiet competence. He was not a brash, loud personality in the officers' club. He was the man you went to if you needed to check your flight plan, the pilot who seemed to have a photographic memory of the coastline of Italy. He had already flown dozens of missions. He had photographed the ports of Naples and Taranto, the marshalling yards of Rome, and the German airfields in Foggia. He had been shot at by flak and chased by fighters. He knew the risks. He understood that survival in an unarmed aircraft depended on executing a mission perfectly. The pre-flight briefing was the start of a mental checklist that continued until he was safely back on the ground. He would study the target photos, memorize landmarks, calculate his headings and timings, and plan his escape routes. He knew the performance limitations of the Bf-109s he might encounter. He knew at what altitude his F-5 had the advantage, and at what altitude they did. He was a student of his craft, a technician of survival. His approach to flying was devoid of emotion. It was a problem of physics and geometry. The objective was to get the cameras over the target at the correct altitude and on the correct heading, and then get himself and the invaluable film back to base. On the 5th of September 1943, the mission was a critical one. Allied intelligence needed up-to-the-minute imagery of German troop concentrations and defensive preparations around Salerno, the site of the upcoming Allied invasion of mainland Italy. The mission required a long, deep penetration into heavily defended airspace. It was a mission for a pilot like Bill Crawford. The takeoff from the Allied base at Bizerte, Tunisia, was at 1100 hours. Crawford's F-5A Lightning was loaded with fuel, its external drop tanks giving it the endurance for the long flight across the Tyrrhenian Sea. The climb to altitude was a slow, steady process, a race against the fuel gauge. He leveled off at 32,000 feet, the sky above a deep, dark violet, the world below a hazy blue canvas. For 2 hours, he flew on a precise heading, cross-referencing his magnetic compass with the distant silhouette of Sardinia off his port wing. He was utterly alone, a tiny silver aircraft in a vast, empty sky. As he approached the Italian coast, he began the final, critical phase of the mission. He switched on the camera heaters to prevent the lenses from frosting over. He checked his oxygen flow. He began his descent to the planned photographic altitude of 22,000 feet, a compromise between camera resolution and safety from light flak. He lined up for his first camera run, the target a series of bridges and road junctions inland from Salerno. The autopilot held the aircraft perfectly steady. The cameras whirred, capturing the ground below in a series of precise, overlapping exposures. It was during his second run that the sky erupted. A battery of German 88mm flak guns, radar-directed and terrifyingly accurate, opened up without warning. The air around the F-5 was filled with the greasy black puffs of shell bursts. An explosion rocked the aircraft, a violent, metallic clang that vibrated through the entire airframe. Shrapnel tore through the right engine nacelle. Warning lights flashed across the instrument panel. The oil pressure for the right engine began to fall. The coolant temperature needle started its inexorable climb towards the red line. Crawford reacted instantly, his training taking over. He finished the camera run, his discipline overriding the instinct to break away. The photos with a mission. He could not come back without them. Once the final frame was taken, he banked the F-axis from the flak, feathered the propeller of his dying right engine to reduce drag, and pushed the nose down to gain speed. He was now flying on one engine, a wounded bird deep in enemy territory. His first priority was to get home. He set a direct course for Bizerte, a long, lonely flight over hundreds of miles of open water. He throttled back the good engine to conserve fuel, nursing the damaged aircraft, maintaining a shallow descent to trade altitude for distance. He was losing altitude, but slowly. The problem was not just the damaged engine. The flak had also damaged the trim controls for his rudder, forcing him to apply constant, heavy pressure on the left rudder pedal to counteract the asymmetric thrust from the single engine. His leg began to ache, then cramp. He was fighting the aircraft every second. It was then that the call came over his radio from a friendly ground control intercept station. "Vector, Vector, bandits approaching your 6 o'clock, Angels 2-1. He scanned the sky behind him. There they were, 8 of them. A flight of Bf-109s from Jagdgeschwader 53, the Ace of Spades group, one of the most experienced German fighter units in the theater. They had been scrambled to intercept him, and they had found him, a lone, single-engine P-38 trailing smoke, an easy kill. Crawford knew he was in an impossible position. He had no guns. His aircraft was damaged and sluggish. He was flying on one engine and fighting his own controls. He could not outrun the Messerschmitts. He could not outclimb them, and he certainly could not outmaneuver them. A conventional defense was suicide. To dive for the deck would only put him at a lower altitude where the Bf-109 had a performance advantage. To weave and jink would put extra strain on his damaged engine and increase his fuel consumption. He had seconds to make a decision. His mind, the mind of the surveyor, the student of geometry, saw the situation not as a dogfight, but as a problem of psychology and expectation. The German pilots had a script. They expected him to run. They expected him to fight back, however feebly. They expected him to act like prey. He decided to do the one thing they would never anticipate. As the lead pair of 109s closed to firing range, Crawford ignored the instinct to flee. Instead, he applied gentle pressure on the control yoke and the left rudder pedal, banking his crippled F-5 into a slow, deliberate, almost lazy turn towards the enemy. He did not turn to fight. He did not turn to escape. He turned as if to join their formation. He leveled his wings, now flying parallel to the lead German fighter, barely 300 yards away. In the German cockpit, the pilot, a veteran of the Eastern Front, was momentarily stunned. This was not in the manual. The American was not running. He was not fighting. He was joining him. It was completely irrational. He held his fire, his mind racing to process the anomaly. Was it a trap? The P-38 was a formidable fighter. Was this a decoy, trying to lure him into the sights of other unseen American fighters? He scanned the empty sky. Nothing. He radioed his flight, his voice a mixture of command and confusion. "Hold your fire. Watch him. He is acting strangely." Crawford, watching the lead 109, knew the bluff had to be maintained. He held his course and airspeed steady, a model of formation flying. He was now part of the German formation, a rogue element that defied all logic. The German flight leader, his attack run spoiled, circled around for another look. This time, he approached from the side, flying close enough to see the details of the American aircraft. He saw the feathered propeller on the right engine. He saw the smoke trail. He saw the distinctive, camera-filled nose of an F-5, an unarmed photo-recon plane. This made even less sense. Why would an unarmed, crippled aircraft turn towards its attackers? Was the pilot surrendering? If so, Why didn't he lower his landing gear, the accepted signal? Was he simply insane? The German pilots chattered on the radio, their transmissions a mix of speculation and suspicion. They had complete tactical superiority. They could have destroyed the F-5 in seconds, but they were paralyzed by confusion. The Americans' illogical action had planted a seed of doubt in their minds, and that doubt was now a more effective defense than any evasive maneuver. The flight leader was now in a difficult position. He was responsible for his 7 other pilots. He could not risk leading them into a potential ambush, no matter how unlikely it seemed. The Americans' behavior was too bizarre, too far outside the bounds of normal combat tactics. After another minute of this strange, silent procession, the German leader made a decision. The risk of a trap, however small, outweighed the reward of shooting down a single, already crippled reconnaissance plane. He gave the command that William Crawford could not hear but could see in the actions of the aircraft around him. Abort immediately. Return to base. The 8 Bf-109s broke away, peeling off one by one and heading back east towards Italy. William Crawford was alone again. He had not fired a shot. He had won a dogfight with geometry. The flight back to Bizerte was a long and agonizing ordeal. With the immediate threat gone, Crawford could focus on the new enemy, his dwindling fuel supply. He descended slowly, carefully managing his single engine, leaning out the fuel mixture to the point of near starvation. His leg throbbed from the constant pressure on the rudder pedal. He flew for over an hour, the blue of the sea stretching to infinity, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for the coast of Africa. He made it. He reached Bizerte with his fuel gauges on empty. He declared an emergency and was given a straight-in approach. The landing was difficult. The asymmetric power and damaged controls made the F-5 unstable at low speeds. He fought the aircraft all the way down, touching down safely but with enough force to blow a tire. The F-5 swerved, but he managed to keep it on the runway. He had brought back the plane. More importantly, he had brought back the film. As he was helped from the cockpit, exhausted and cramping, the ground crews were already carefully removing the precious film magazines from the nose of the aircraft. The film was rushed to the photo interpretation unit. The images, when developed, were perfect. They provided a crystal-clear picture of the German defenses and logistical hubs around Salerno. The intelligence was invaluable, and it would be used to refine the invasion plans, saving countless Allied lives in the weeks to come. In his debriefing, Crawford recounted the mission in his typical, understated style. He described the flak, the engine failure, and the encounter with the 8 Bef-109s. When he explained his tactic of turning towards the enemy, the intelligence officer was incredulous. It was a story so bizarre it had to be true. The ultimate verification would come from the enemy themselves. Allied radio intelligence, the Y service, had intercepted and recorded the German flight's communications. The transcripts, once translated, told the story perfectly. They captured the initial confident report of a lone, damaged P-38. Then, the confused chatter, the leader's order to hold fire, the speculation about a trap, and finally, the frustrated command to abort the intercept. The German pilots, in their own words, had been completely outthought. For his actions on that day, for successfully completing a critical reconnaissance mission despite heavy damage to his aircraft, and for saving himself and his aircraft through an act of unprecedented ingenuity and courage. First Lieutenant William Crawford was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross America's second highest award for valor. The official citation would speak of his extraordinary heroism and brilliant airmanship. The story of William Crawford's psychological victory became a legend within the reconnaissance community. While it never became official doctrine, the circumstances were too unique, the risk too high. It served as a powerful lesson in the value of unconventional thinking. It was a reminder that the pilot's mind was his primary weapon. An aircraft was a tool, but it was the pilot's ability to think, to adapt, and sometimes to do the utterly illogical that determined survival. The incident was a perfect case study in what modern military theory calls OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Crawford had disrupted the German pilots' OODA loop by acting in a way that was completely outside their orientation, their understanding of combat. He had forced them into a state of indecision, preventing them from acting. The tactical lesson was that psychological disruption could be as effective as physical destruction. The strategic impact of the mission was more direct. The photographs Crawford brought back were instrumental in the planning for Operation Avalanche, the Allied landing at Salerno. They allowed Allied planners to target key German command posts, artillery positions, and supply lines, softening the battlefield before the troops went ashore. It is impossible to quantify, but the intelligence from that single, nearly disastrous flight undoubtedly saved the lives of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Allied soldiers. In the archives, the mission report exists as a dry, factual account. The intercepted German radio traffic sits in a separate file, a ghostly echo of a moment of high drama. Crawford's Distinguished Service Cross citation is a public record, but together they tell a complete story, a small but perfect narrative of how one man, in an unarmed and crippled airplane, defeated 8 enemy fighters without firing a shot. The sky over the Salerno coast is peaceful now. The beaches, once the scene of a desperate and bloody invasion, are now crowded with tourists. The air is filled with the sound of cicadas, not the roar of radial engines. The memory of the war has faded, softened by time. William Crawford survived the war. He returned to Pennsylvania and to his career as a surveyor, a man who had once mapped the skies of Europe. He was a quiet hero of a secret war. His victory measured not in enemy aircraft destroyed, but in the priceless images he brought home. His story is a powerful reminder that in the complex calculus of war, courage is not always about aggression. Sometimes it is about discipline, sometimes it is about intellect, and sometimes it is about having the audacity to make a gentle turn when the world expects you to run. It is a story about the power of a single, brilliant, unexpected idea to overcome impossible odds.